Let's dive in. I like diving in. Okay,
Let's dive in.
Tashi, how do you know Kurt?
Yeah, so Kurt and I worked together on some pretty cool projects in Australia and Asia. So through the JLL Flex offering, Census is our back-end technology provider for all the booking systems. So I always, I was even talking to Short about this the other day. I was always like, oh man, our model is so different. We can get into it. That sometimes I think when a Census and JLL did that partnership, you guys would have been like, sweet, JLL, we're gonna have hundreds of sites. But it went in the opposite direction because we're very tailored and we have a smaller collection of them. But that's how we met, and we've had a really good working relationship since.
And that is accurate, Tashi. As soon as I signed that MSA, I was like, we're going to have 150 locations, guys.
He bought a
overnight.
bigger
This is
house.
going to be
He
amazing.
had
That's
another
it.
kid.
Yeah.
No, in fact, it was like, man, we've got the toughest deal and partnership agreement out there, but we'll make it work. But it's interesting. We'll get into it on this pod. Our measurement of success is so warped in a positive way,
Okay.
in the sense of the landlord and the industry, that I think it forces us to innovate quite a bit more than some of our traditional operator colleagues and friends who have the correct kind of milestones for their style. So, but yeah, and hopefully, Kurt, it means that the stuff that we're working on now means it's more stuff for a census because we're actually scaling within the building beyond the co-working and flexes. I'm sure you've been teased at.
I have been, and I've been very, I guess, a little bit hurt that, Sean got to step in and really take advantage of all of my hard work and late nights. We're in the inverse right now. Tashi's up at 4 a.m. his time, 6 a.m. Yeah, there we go, doing these
It's
calls.
6 a.m. now, but he's been up since 4:30 with the baby.
Well, I was on the other side during COVID doing the original deals with Tashi 5-6 years ago, but we kind of really did just dive in. Tashi, maybe it makes sense for those of the listeners that have never heard of who Tashi Dorjee is. I don't know how, if they're on LinkedIn, they don't know who you are. You're prolific. You're everywhere. Your videos are fantastic, but maybe can you just enlighten those who are unenlightened as to who Tashi is and what he does?
Sure. And I'll give a little flavor before the co-working stuff, like a couple of seconds of that. And it might be a bit of a litmus test and a canary why I'm so crazy, even when it comes to the co-working thinking. But I'm a biomedical engineer by trade, but decided it wasn't for me. And the first real business I set up was a rainforest protection company with a couple of early founders. I was one of the middle team founding members. And to this day, we still protect 1 million hectares of rainforest in Aceh, Indonesia. And that was kind of like we could measure how much carbon emissions we prevented from being released into the atmosphere by protecting those rainforests. And did a deal with Governor one day, who was the governor of Aceh at the time. Even did a documentary with Hugh Jackman, who narrated and stuff, because we were this pretty cool Australian company that did it. But this was a lifetime ago. The love of sustainability, I guess, helped me pivot into co-working in a very weird, serendipitous way. I moved back to Australia, and the first co-working business that I did was turning restaurants that were closed during the day into co-working spaces. And that idea came from, wanting to reuse space in a world where we were getting less and less. And that took about 6-7 years of my life, which was, a very gritty experience because I didn't pay myself that entire time. It all went back into the business, and we hit a pretty juicy valuation for a bootstrap startup, about 10 million bucks. But then COVID hit, and because we were very much leveraging hospitality venues and hotel venues, and there's a lot of learnings there, because I almost feel like if someone was crazy enough, I would never do it, to do that model today properly and build the correct community platform and technology to connect all the places, it would work really well in a very fragmented working hybrid
Somebody's
environment.
working on it because we've been pitched
Okay.
podcast guest. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm pretty
cool.
sure. And WeWork there was a model in New York, bad timing, wrong
spacious.
location. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
That's right. It's almost like we saw them as well, and we were like, shit, man. Like, if we can make this work in Australia and Asia, we can make it work anywhere, because costs are so high here.
Yeah.
Even, staffing and stuff and everything. So we had a huge amount of learnings there. Our user base grew, and I know this is more than the 2 seconds before I even get to the channel. That's a trend that you'll see that I follow, where I just, go off on tangents. But a lot of learnings there. Like, we had over like 20,000 users, 15,000 users, and they all had offices somewhere else or at home, but they still paid to work from somewhere else, because they all subscribed to the ethos that you think differently in different environments, and they wanted to be part of something. So I think it works now. There's just a lot of teething problems with that model. And then JLL, funnily enough, about just over 5 years ago, put out a job ad, a very, cryptic, hey, we need a flex person. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This JD doesn't even make sense. But I was like, I'll apply, sure. And, they took a chance on me because they wanted some different thinking. The model wasn't what it is today, and it's evolved in the last 5 years. But in essence, right now, what we do is we help investor landlords design, build, and operate their own co-working spaces. And it's a very niche demographic because even though it's talked a lot about, those white label bespoke operations, a lot of the risk sits on the landlord. So it's really the ones that really want to dive in and create something their own and see how it, pushes and it helps the wider ecosystem of their building. So we do a lot of that. And that's been developing quite healthily, especially over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Tashi, you've done some really cool deployments. I'm sure Jamie will put some links in the show notes, but could you maybe talk about what it was like to turn on some of these, I guess, second gen? So I'm thinking of like Quantum Terminal, right? Like that whole deployment, I think, is incredibly special. Maybe talk a little bit about what it was like to stand up co-working operation with the government, right? Because that's
sure. It was
something that a lot of people are trying to figure out. Yeah, it's kind of topical, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm half joking, but that's a good one. Another one's like Melbourne Connect Co-working. That's with the university. So I think those are great, and I think they're primed for an operator to come into this space and deliver more of, because the Quantum Terminal is an example of one in Sydney, Australia, where the New South Wales government wanted to, funnily enough, create a new Silicon Valley within Sydney, like kind of wanted to attract quantum computing talent and tech. And I'm sure there'll be an artificial intelligence version coming up. And because it was with the government, obviously, they wanted as much value as possible with minimal amount of budget, in a funny way. So it was about 3,500 square meters, but we only had about $2 million in capex to inject. So a lot of operators out there, or anyone who's been involved in a design build, are like, that is nothing. So we took over an existing Transport New South Wales government tenancy, so 2 floors of desks, which, funnily enough, was very nice because government desks are very generous. So it's almost the size of 2 co-working desks, even within an office. So we only spent like a couple of $100 on the carpet and fixing everything and used that. But the real money was spent on the level 3, which was a big 900 circa square meter, or 9,000 square feet for your audience. That metric's a bit wonky, but it's kind of right, that conversion into this big collaborative multi-purpose event space. So if you got a desk downstairs, which was heavily subsidized for this quantum computing community, you could go up there and essentially work. And there'd be like lots of pods, lots of informal meeting spaces, one of the largest event spaces in Sydney. So it was booked out a lot. And I think, space aside, it created this really unique ecosystem of quantum computing companies. And that was a huge success. Now, from the government side, one thing that you need to wrap your head around as a co-working operator, if you ever venture into that space, and I think this is the reason why we were really well suited for working with government, is that they're not going to let you just run your business. You're going to almost have to volunteer a lot of that control. So there's a headache involved. And this is kind of why the JLL Flex team work in a lot of niche areas, because we're willing to volunteer a lot of that control. Because at the end of the day, even when you think about the business that we've set up within JLL, our measurement of success is solving this problem for the government, because JLL does an infinite amount of more business with that government through the brokers, through the leasing team, tenant rep. Whereas as a traditional operator, even if I was still an entrepreneur and had my own business, it probably would have been a bum deal, because I would have been like, I can make 5 times more out of management fees doing a traditional offering. And I don't want this, 4 or 5 stakeholder group from the government side poking on every deal that I do. Because it was literally every license agreement that would come in, or opportunity, it'd have 3 stakeholders of ours, 3 from the government, and like this plethora of boxes that needed to be ticked to make sure that they were fitting for that ecosystem. So if you're willing to go through that pain and volunteer that, I think there's a bright future of figuring out what that deal looks like for governments wherever you are in that world. Because aside from these niche communities, I think there's a huge argument now that I think co-working and flex really contributes to the social structure of some of these micro cities because of flexibility and everything, but I won't get into that. So that was a huge success. And Melbourne Connect was with a university because they wanted to really target and create a community for Melbourne University partners, delegates. They wanted to target medtech and biotech. So one of our first examples of a very focused co-working space in terms of the type of customers that would be used. And that was about a circa 20,000 square feet, 21,000 square feet space. And that worked really well, but similar to eating pains in terms of when you do something like that, you're going to almost have these two parties, yours and your partners, that vet every customer that comes in. And we were able to make that work because, again, since the way we're measured, and to the point I was making earlier, why we can innovate a bit in this space quite aggressively, the management fees that we pulled out of it was probably at least half or a third of what I would have done if I wanted to set up a normal space. But, I'm loving it because of that weird kind of, measurement of success there. It means we can do quirky, cool deals that experiment with the space, experiment with the building. We've got a few that we're launching now, which I'm happy to talk about later. But yeah, so before I keep rambling, I'll keep it to those two examples, Kurt.
I was going to say, Jamie, you better get in there
I have
because I don't
questions,
know. We only
of
got
course.
45 minutes here.
Totally. Okay. So in this model, are you running it for the client, the university or the government, or are you teaching them how to run it themselves?
We're running it.
Okay.
So yeah. So even though we're part of JLL, we almost operate as a startup within the business where we hire talent from the co-working industry.
Yeah.
And we're responsible
got
for the employees and site stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting.
So it's funny that you say that though, because we do have a bunch of clients in the landlord space that essentially go, hey, we want to do this ourselves. Can you teach us? And we're like, well, the first couple of years are super hard.
Yeah.
You setting it up and everything. You might as well just engage us on a management agreement, and it's a glorified training process. We'll even cut it down to 3 years.
We'll help you survive the first 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you're off
and
and
then-
running. Yeah.
And then kick us out if you want, or you'll realize that it's cheaper, just pay us, to do a great job. So
And how many of them have kicked you out?
none yet.
Yeah.
None yet. But it's still early days.
Still early. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Kurt, back to you.
Speaking of kind of your visionary application of the power of JLL to activate co-working, some have said that CBRE purchased Industrious to compete with Tashi Dorjee specifically. Can you weigh in?
I actually read that article and I flicked it around like crazy. I was like, hey, instead of this chicken and egg thing where you're seeing how I can grow this startup, you want to give me some funding. I think it's great for the industry and the environment. I really do. I even flicked Jamie and a bunch of the team a note, whether they read it or not, because that's essentially what I'm trying to do at JLL and have been over the 5 years. We've never been a play where, even though we technically operate spaces, where we wanted world domination, at least in Australia, because each of the regions operate quite differently. But I would argue the APAC team is quite proactive in this space.
Yeah, definitely.
We've never really wanted to have, every year we need 3 new sites or 4 new sites or 5. We don't have that metric. It's more, how do we, do some cool shit? Because like when you think about it, if you're a traditional operator, you've got those targets, whether you answer to a board or stakeholders, or even if you're private, you're like, we need X new sites because that's how we generate our income. Within JLL, there's almost 2 buckets. There's one, how do we help the other business units hit their numbers? Because even when you think about a lot of these brokers, when they pitch to be the broker appointed on a new asset, all of these landlords are asking for a flex strategy. If we help them get appointed, we help the leasing agents make that money. Tenant rep, very interestingly, in Australia, is leaning more and more into flex because these major big companies are asking for flex strategies. And I've spoken to like 4 or 5 banks in Australia in the last 6 months, all going, hey man, shit, we normally take a shit ton of space, but our return to work strategy is so whack right now. Even if it increases by 5%, we need a whole new floor because our headcount is so big. What does it look like if we do flex? Like, how crazy is that? Imagine a major bank doing flex. So in the sense that if we normally have 20 floors of office space, but we only need 15 today, Tash, can you and your team, because you're very malleable in the way you approach flex, take 5 and you design and build it so it looks and feels like the rest of the bank's tenancy, and we even do the test fits in a way where it's not complete co-working but can be operated in a way that returns maybe half the rent. We still take a fee, but then the bank on a dime can be like, oh
take
yep,
it.
we're return to work and we're growing employees, we need 3 floors back, we reduce your operation to 2 floors. I'm still smiling because I've got 2 floors, could even be 1 floor. But then so it's a fantastic example of why tenants are interested. So it's like this new era of tenant flex, which is going to be hyper complicated because of security and everything, and they'll want a certain community, but I think it's growing. And then more interestingly, like similar to what they're doing, I've been trying to do it a while. How do we integrate in the JLL property asset management team? If we're managing all these properties, especially in Australia, and I genuinely believe, and I've been saying this for about 2 years now, but normally that's how it works within my neck of the woods. I got to project for like 2 years and try and will it into reality, and then clients like, is I think we're very rapidly, even in Australia, approaching a point where all these new developments and buildings are emerging and tenants are asking for flexibility. But now landlords are like RFPing for a co-working operator, but you've already got 4 or 5 co-working operations in that area precinct that are only 80% occupied, 75. So you'd be crazy to put another co-working operator in there because it's already saturated to a degree. But the only reason they're putting a co-working operator in that building is because they think tenants need it. So how cool would it be if you didn't necessarily need 20, 30,000 square feet operation in there? You could do a flex light solution, which we're looking into, where it's only like 6,000 square feet, 7,000, more of an amenity, but run operationally in a way where it washes its face, it's commercially viable, if it's integrated with the JLL property asset management team, if it's already in there, or if the landlord in some cases manage their own building, we figure it out with them. You tick your flex box, and then you're not necessarily sitting on this huge operation that could be a risk. And for us, that still makes sense as a deal, because if we're solving a problem for the landlord and it makes the property asset managers team stickier from a JLL wider business unit and network perspective, it makes sense for me. Might not make sense for another operator because like, screw this, man, I'm not making any money off it. And then you can explore, because we're in the building, how do we service the spec suites in the building? How do we extend the connectivity, Trojan horse for all this cool flex shit,
I love it. I mean, that's what I've been saying for 2 years as well. So
Well,
hopefully
that's
we
the dream.
meet in the middle.
So is that thinking like current in Australia? Because it's not very common in the US yet. I think
I'm pushing it hard, and I think I'm a unique, crazy person to push it, just because I can, because the model makes sense for me. It would look crap on anyone else's spreadsheet or P&L.
Yeah. I know that point you make is so interesting. It's like, well, you importing an operator into that ecosystem with some of those examples, right? The incentives don't align. But if you can, this is why it's valuable for JLL to have this competency. But then you have to get the brokers and the asset management like all thinking that way, and that's still hard. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say 50% of my job is internally aligning everyone, and has been for the last 5 years. Like it really has. And to JLL's credit, the first couple of years was tough, but now it's almost like, and Kurt's kind of seeing this unfold, because the first 3 years of my career at JLL has been like really helping all the other teams without asking for anyone, helping leasing agents get appointed, tenant reps, property asset managers. Now it's kind of like when finally I'm almost Oliver Twisting, please sir, may I have some help on some of these? So like, yeah, we got you. And then as long as some key clients within the market are excited about this concept, which they are, some major ones, they're like, okay, this is real, because you got the client excited about it now we have
like
to
the bank.
it.
I love the bank example, is brilliant.
Tech companies, banks, you know, anyone who's got surplus office space, because right now the solution is just to sublease it, and that's already saturated, and the agents like it, because if I get into the building, whether it's FlexLight or something, you can market all of that vacant space in a much more sexy manner. Like I call it spec suites with a service, because they're doing a lot of spec suites in Australia. It's like, hey, whether they use it or not, who cares? Just differentiate the spec suites in the building you're trying to lease out from the one next door, because you've got someone doing stuff for them in there,
Totally. Yep. Like the Tishman model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, you have big banks in America that are doing that as well. So that is more of a global scenario. So I've seen that a couple of times where owners will have contingencies that people, the banks can just take the floor back. You got to relocate these people in 30 days. Bye.
Yeah.
So, I'm very curious to see how, going back to the CBRE and industrious play, how the best practices that you just outlined that we've all seen as the exciting next frontier, how that gets flushed out, because they have the inner workings, but how quickly can they get everyone to buy in, especially in the States? Because it's going to be, that's going to be the tough part, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's I think because it's a top down thing, they're gonna kind of just hammer it in. Like they've essentially created this new team. So if the co-working and the property asset management team are forced almost to, the way I would do it if I put my hat on there is, rather than theorize it, you'd almost find a champion CBRE client with a portfolio of assets that they manage, bring it to them first and be like, hey, we've just spent 600 mil on this thing, 800 mil. Well, I always round it up to a bill for effect when I talk to people, close to a bill, but, and then reverse engineer what it would look like for their buildings across a portfolio of them, or pilot. Because then what I've always found, trying to do this within the JLL perspective, if you blue sky think it, no one really takes it seriously. You've got an asset or a portfolio and you've got to figure it out. Suddenly it's real because you got costs, you got staff, you got delivery, you got promises to the client, you got deadlines. And then if it's attached to a CBRE retaining that landlord's property asset management deal, then it becomes super real. Suddenly everyone's incentivized to do it. I honestly think, and they're probably all over this, they don't need me to tell them, how to suck eggs. But if they really want the co-working team not to operate like this shiny new toy island within CBRE, they almost need leadership to proactively figure out a way how to help all the business units before even asking for anything. Because what I have found is that when you're the shiny new toy within a large commercial real estate services firm, it's great because everyone wants to kind of throw you in front of their client, even if it's just a conversation so they look smart. Right. So it's another reason for them to speak to their client. But then turning that into a deal and not just a wasted resource and time, you got to really think about how do you manage that efficiently so you don't just burn a ton of money and time.
Well, and to your point, the alignment of incentives, I have to call out. Do you guys know Nick Livigny? Kurt, I'm sure I know you do. He had this great post on LinkedIn, which I just put in the chat, about why the UK market is so much further along in terms of flex than the US market. Yeah. And for me, I was like, oh, okay. I get it. I mean, and his, key, quote was, as Charlie Munger said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And I think the CBRE example is, how do you align broker incentives, for example, right? To your point, okay, if they can figure out how to use it to get a new client, but then they have to really understand it. And then where do they fit into the, it's like, but they still really just want to sign long-term lease deals. And so that's what their incentive is. The, property managers in more strategic roles, would have different incentives. So it'll be, to your point, even if it's top down, you got to figure out the incentives. And I think the broker structure is always going to be challenging in the US because of that.
I see it almost as like 3 prongs. And again, free strategic advice for CBRE and industrials if you want to listen. But you'd figure this out anyway. I'm just fast tracking some of this for you. I might get a tap on the shoulder from someone in jail. I'll be like, dude, you can't do that.
What are you
shit.
doing?
I'm like, it's already out there. What are you going to do? There's 3 things, because they've got different offerings. To your point, incentivizing it with the brokers, I think they'll do what they've always done, because industrials have certain product offerings where even if they do a management style agreement, they may take a hybrid lease or they may guarantee some sort of base rental income. So the brokers will still get their incentive, so it's almost like as long as they put something on the table, that means that any co-working operator that they would compete with, they'd get the same rate from. That's kind of how you do it. And maybe there's some sort of pat on the back reward system for putting an industrious first, that kind of brand first internally. The PAM, the property asset management one's interesting because I feel like even when I look at that character dynamic in JLL, they're not commission driven. They're more client driven. They're like, oh shit, because when you think about it, like just imagine if, and here's something I've already spoken about heaps, so it's not a secret. If you're managing the building, whether you're CBRE or JLL, you've got Flora Flex, whether it's a small amount of flex or a large amount, and CBRE in their announcement, they were teasing something similar to Flex Light, where it could just be a small amount of space, right? Because they're looking at unmanned sites and stuff like that to keep OPEX low. Imagine if you put the property asset manager's office in there. So then suddenly your manager's office, rather than hiding in some shitty basement or some random place in the building, is living within the Flex, the amenity. And then all the tenants that come down and use it, because it'll be a tenant prioritized space, they start kind of like, as long as they've got their private office to talk about or which tenant they want to bitch and moan about or whatever, they kind of be all friendly. You create this element of stickiness as well. Like it's almost like bringing hospitality easier into the property asset management space because they're no longer hiding from the tenants and may bump into them only when they need something fixed.
But the PM is not usually a hospitality profile.
No.
You know what I mean?
No,
to your point, the bitching in the office, like, but then, hey, I love you.
Well, yeah. So maybe it's more for the prime assets, but you can kind of see how even having more accidental collisions or bump-ins serves well. And then from a property manager's angle, it arguably makes them a bit more sticky because they're not. Hopefully, they'll be able to build more relationships. So you're right. Maybe that's reserved more for that.
There's a way to do it. There's totally a way to do it. I think in theory, it makes a lot of sense. It just that the profile may have to shift a little bit, and
So this is great, right? Because I couldn't do that, like in my current role, because I'm still a startup, right? Figuring it out, but having a bit of autonomy to do cool stuff. But from a CBRE angle, because they've spent all this money to integrate it, maybe when they get appointed to new assets, that's a new conversation, right? Rather than reinventing what's existing, if they're pitching to manage a new asset and they're pitching to put an industrial space in there and pitching to manage it and pitching to put the office in there, they proactively hire for someone that could be slightly elevated. To fit that. Maybe that's the angle. So you got the brokers doing their own thing, which is always commission focused. And then you've got the property asset managers team, which is very much more strategic client retention focused. So if it's positioned for them that way, you'd like to think you could do like a junket to everyone and they get it and they want to put you in front of their client, or it just turns into a very concise, sexy info pack attached to every property asset management proposal that goes out. Oh, by the way, we can do this. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they go, but because they've got a full, engine behind them now, they should figure it out real quick. I'm very proud of what my team's done over here, but it looks like a Ferrari from the outside, but you pop the hood, it's like this little kind of like makeshift engine that we've figured out how to do, over the last 5 years. But we're making
on that, Tashi, though, I think it's not a makeshift engine. Maybe it's like it's almost Ford or something. It is somehow it may It is impressive because you're the last group standing. JLL Flex at one time did span every continent. Well, at least that was the goal, to span every continent. And now it's pretty much APAC, right? That's the limit of the breadth. What have you done that's working? How did you survive? And I guess
I think for us, it was really figuring out what our measurement of success was. And rather than focus on a metric or a goal that was purely, we need as many spaces as possible, feeding this much in fees, how do we make everyone win? So earlier on the podcast, I was saying we design, build, operate. We always make an effort to kind of provide that holistic package. So if we design it, we've got a JLL design services team. So if they design it, that's fees to JLL, right? And they're a very talented team because they've hired from all the top brands around the world. If we can manage, contract, or project manage the build, because that's got to go somewhere. And the argument is, if I'm going to operate it for the next 5-10 years, I want to make sure it's designed and built the correct way, especially if I've got commercial targets. Well, we've got a whole project delivery services team at JLL. If they manage that build, it's fees there. So before the site's even set up, there's a quantum of income that could go to JLL that I get to go, hey, we've helped these groups make it. So therefore, maybe potentially the management fee that should have been X could now be Y. And it's a negotiation tactic with the client. And then if I'm bringing my management fees down because we're looking at accruing them and compounding them anyway with multiple sites, then I can make certain sites work that shouldn't. Like the Quantum Terminal one on the Melbourne Co-working, if you suddenly threw in a market expectation management fee there, I think we've lost Kurt. You see, this is what happens when I go on tangents. Is like, I've had enough of this shit.
He's like, I'm gonna go get a coffee. I'll be back. Okay, go on. He'll come back.
Keep going. Yeah, is we can start making those sites work that isn't. But I think we were very much measured in helping the other business units, and we made that a big thing, right? And even though it's not necessarily income into our P&L, it was recognized as almost like we call it halo revenue, right? Because we're a drop in the bucket compared to all these other fees anyway. And then growth for us, rather than try and sell to everyone, we really figured out, okay, the type of landlord that we're going to help is very, very niche. You know,
Yeah.
I reckon even if, and because we're a small to medium team, we could only, unless we started proactively hiring, maybe set up 3 a year tops anyway, right? So I think for us, and also our deal structure is very risk off because a lease or any form of guaranteed income would sit on JLL's P&L in a very, non-forgiving manner. Which, to my joke earlier, our deal structure, the owner really needs to want that element of control because we essentially, all the risk is on the landlord. They pay for the capex. If it's 0% occupied, they're on the hook for the operating costs of the staff. We don't do a base rental guarantee. We might do a hurdle or waterfall payment structure.
Yeah.
And then we take, base management fee, rev share, profit share, or whatever. But the advantage is that we completely create something special for them.
Yeah.
Branded, looks and feels, flexibility in the deal, complete control to the point where they get to say who wants to do what.
Which is not typical in the typical management agreement, right?
So
they're getting
because even if I think about it, if I'm guaranteeing half the rent, I'm not going to give you the flexibility and tell me how to run my business.
No, I don't even want to spend the time like emailing you about it. I mean, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's kind of what they're getting. So I think because we went down that route, we've been relatively successful here. And I think the future looks bright because that niche demographic of landlord is slowly growing. And the management agreement, which I've been preaching for the last 5 years, is becoming more and more accepted and owners are starting to realize the benefits of that control. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love it. It's very niche and I love it. Okay, so if Gio was on, we would need to be flipping to your personal story. So,
okay,
I don't want to talk about like all the, but I'm curious. So you have this YouTube channel, which may be getting harder to keep consistent with since you're not getting any sleep. Oh, it's getting light out now. I can see.
Yeah. I was
coming up in your background. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, talk about your moonlighting on YouTube and what the channel's about and why you do it.
That's so cute. Thanks for asking because I have a lot of fun with it, right? And part of the reason I did it is because my stepson Madden, who's 15, wanted to do YouTube, and I'm like, well, you can't show your face for a while because he wanted to do it around 13 or whatever. So I started helping him
because they all think they're going to grow up and be YouTubers. That's like isn't that crazy?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Well, I was at my family's place, my aunt's place for Easter, and they had Mr. Beast on. All the kids were watching, and I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
But for me, YouTube, honestly, it started like some of the first videos I did. It was just because I really missed kind of the startup entrepreneur ecosystem because one of the first videos I did was it was meant to be a 5-10 minute video where I just talked about my first startup, Two Space, the co-working one.
Yeah.
And it turned into a 1 hour rant. I don't even know where
it was like a therapy session.
It was. And like looking back, it was such a loser move, but cute because I even like went to the gym, I showered, I was like, I want to get this out of me. I put a suit on and I never wear suits. And I'm like, oh, I want this to be taken seriously. I even put a tie on. I was like, I don't even know how to do a Windsor knot anymore. I haven't worn a tie in so long. So I got rid of the tie. And then I just right. And it was received really well. I was like, oh, okay. And so I just started doing more videos. Like I've committed to kind of doing a video a week around pretty much there's 3 themes. One's just startup advice, and not trying to be the expert here. I'm almost trying to frame myself as the cool, weird uncle at the Christmas dinner or lunch that's kind of done it. And if you've got questions, you can ask and I'll give you my 2 cents. So very authentic, vulnerable kind of content. Corporate crossover stuff. So I think, I'm a good example of going from entrepreneur to corporate.
Wait, I was going to ask, is JLL your first job?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay.
Yeah. I did a bit of consulting with Hub Australia, which was those guys who were great.
I know Brad very well.
Yeah, Brad and JP and those guys. But JLL was my first real corporate gig. Like everything before that was so huge culture shock for me. But it was great to get a paycheck, right? So I talk about how I take those entrepreneurial learnings and apply it there, and what's that like. And the last one is just whatever I want to talk about, like passion projects. Like I just shot a video like a few days ago because I've been doing it for a year now. What I've kind of learned doing this for a year and having about 1,500 subscribers. And honestly, it's an outlet for me. I'm not expecting anything from it. Like at the start, I was like, trying to figure out ways how to generate income in other areas, through ad revenue or sponsors and stuff. But now I'm just like, if I do this every week, one video a week, and put some thought and effort into it. So I've kind of taken film classes and stuff to try and get the video right and everything. Imagine if I do this for the next 5 years. I know that sounds blah, but me in 5 years' time might appreciate it because I might have a decent community following that I could do something with. And this is the crazy thing. I think I live in a generation where even though I work really hard, it's going to be hard to hand over like houses and all that kind of stuff to my kids, right? Because things are so expensive.
Yep.
So I'm like, what's a form of generational wealth I could give to my son or that?
Your YouTube channel?
Yeah. Imagine if I'm on my deathbed, or I'm like, Adrian's like, here you go, here's a channel with 100,000 subscribers.
Here's my login.
Yeah, and because I've built this channel through a very authentic get to know me, but here's what we'll do is we'll talk to everyone and be like, hey, I'm going to give it to Madden or Logan now, whoever's interested. But they're going to talk about what they love. Fishing, cars, their job. I don't know. Who cares? And by then, surely, if I'm consistent, because a video a week's, it's almost like therapeutic for me because I just talk about whatever I like. I'm not really the type to do the market research to be like, what's the keywords? What's trending? So some videos flop, some do well.
Yep.
Imagine if I could do that for them and they make a little bit of money off it to be the equivalent of rent or something like that. I don't know. So that's my crazy kind of angle for it,
Wait, so your stepson, did he do anything with YouTube, or is he just now watching you?
He's over the YouTube hub. He's not into it anymore because he was doing like Minecraft videos and stuff like that.
Cool now because you're doing it. So,
well, the funny thing is when I first started, I was like, I was trying to hack the algorithm. Hey, Madden, Natalie, my wife, and my brother Jordan, can you all like within 5 minutes of loading up, watch it and comment because it feeds the algorithm. So because unfortunately I did that for the first like few weeks, he's kind of put off all the videos. He's like, do I have to watch it? I'm like, no, you don't have to watch it anymore. It's totally fine. But no, he's not really into it. Every now and then he watches it, which is very cute because like there was one video where I did where it was essentially me trying to play the uncle card going, hey, if you're trying to pick your course for university right now, here's some advice from me because I did study biomedical engineering and look at my career now, nothing to do with it. So don't be too hard on yourself. Just I'd rather you pick something that you apply yourself.
Yeah.
Just apply yourself, right? And he actually watched it and he's like, I watched your video, and I'm like, oh, that's so. I was gonna have that conversation with you anyway when you finished high school, but it's really cool that you watched it.
Then he won't want to hear it. I mean, it's the indirect thing. I listen to podcasts in the car, and we have a cabin near Lake Tahoe, and so we have these long drives, and so I have to listen to clean things. I have a 13-year-old and no swearing allowed, which is actually challenging. So I can do like how I built this. I mean, that's one of them. So I just save them all up and then listen to them in the car. And my daughter will like very secretly listen to them she sits in the back seat with the dogs. So she'll listen. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything about the fact that she's listening. She asked me a question about one the other day, or she looked something up and texted it to me. And I was like, oh, were you listening? And I was like, this is very cool because she has no interest in me being, coaching her or like parenting, right? But you realize like they're watching and listening to what
they observe. Like,
I was like, so that's my angle is like,
I think you should, and I think you'd be surprised. Like I remember, because my wife, when her and I met, we were both entrepreneurs trying to do our own startups and stuff. And when Madden was around, we met when he was around 7. By the time he was 9, just because he'd be listening to us even discuss stuff like that, he wrote a play email to us, like on the laptop when I went to the bathroom. I saved it. I took a picture of it. It was like addressing the team. It was like how proud I am of everyone, how far we've come. And this is like a 9-year-old kid. I'm like, whoa. So
That's great.
They do absorb stuff. And Madden's a really good example of 15 where, by the time he finishes high school, which is going to come sooner than we think, he's so creative. I just want to support him into doing something that he really wants to do. And because I just feel like with where the world's at and how, degrees translate to jobs, it's not simple
not as
anymore.
linear. It's totally not.
It's not.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. These two, they were, I can't remember, it was an AI podcast, I think, and they were saying like it's back. They think it's back to liberal arts degrees being the way to go, which for some time was like, that's a waste of money. What's your return on investment? But they were like, you just need to learn how to think because, you don't really need to know how to code anymore because AI can, there's like, you need to be able to think and do something you love.
I agree. Like imagine if, because I imagine we all got into co-working in weird, quirky ways. We didn't study co-working or office. Imagine if you did like behavioral psychology in uni. How useful would that be right now in co-working and the future of work? Because you'd be like, oh, this is how people think and this is how people work. Because like, even though I'm not the best student, like the practices I learned from engineering in terms of how things, fit together and how you solve problems, I use still to this day because it's just been ingrained in me. I feel like sometimes the weird, quirky degree will somehow resurface and show value, even in an indirect way. Yeah.
Quiz, Tashi, do you know what Kurt's degree is in?
I'm gonna say rocket science. Science.
Oh, Tashi, I'm flattered.
Really?
Okay. No, you go.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, you.
No, because because the question, it's obviously something you wouldn't expect, right? Drama. Some sort of.
Also very good. Thank you. No, music. Pretty close to the former
I was
arts.
close.
So, yes,
Music
you're
and
very close.
and
Music and professional sales. So
it's a degree in professional sales in music.
Hey,
Cool, right?
no wonder when sometimes I feel like Kurt sells me, I feel like I'm being serenaded.
That's exactly
in a very subconscious way. I should have put that together because I was just about to say your previous background had like guitars and shit on the wall. God damn it! Why didn't I access that memory in my brain for that question?
Wait,
It was
he's a
5
rock.
years
He's
ago.
a literal rock star. He plays
He
in
is.
bands. Yeah,
And Kurt Patrick is such a rock star name.
he was meant to be famous.
Kurt Patrick. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I could have been, but to your point, it is funny how where you have been mold you, and being a musician, it's tough. Like you're constantly, because no one picks up an instrument and is amazingly good at it. Like that just doesn't happen, regardless of what anybody tells you. It's so much work. It's so much sweating the details to get something to the point where it is able to be performed live. And you're so critical. You're so introspective on how this thing sounds, how it would be received. So yeah, I did that in college for a degree and found, that I could be a professional sales minor at the end of it when my rock star career didn't quite work out. And like, yeah, it gives you that foundation to be a more rounded human. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. It's a very strange world that we live in, but yeah, if you can pull things from other facets of your life. be better.
Jamie, what did you study?
Oh gosh.
Wait,
Somebody
make him
think one of
guess.
my you want to guess? Yeah, go ahead, guess.
I want to say law.
Ooh. Huh.
You'd be a great lawyer, I reckon. Like
No, I
in a nice way. Like
Oh,
not
okay. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be a lawyer though.
But it's
I think just
it's a very prestigious degree to pick and do, and
I have an
because
MBA, so
there you
kind of
go.
close. But I grew up in a tiny town in upstate New York at a time when, mostly before the internet. So in the time when you didn't know what the jobs could be. So you pick
Sure.
something that's readily available. So I was going, and this is, sort of like I was going to be a news anchor on TV.
I can
Also-
see that totally. I can
So,
totally
yep,
see
I was going to be a
that.
news anchor. So here I am, I've
but local news. I don't think Jamie could hack like national.
I
Putting
didn't have
reporting on the
wasn't
cows
thinking-
very much in your wheelhouse.
Totally. Now I'd shoot for like The View or I'd do I'd go big. So I went to Ithaca College, which has a big communications and they send people to be news anchors and whatnot. But I switched my degree because at orientation, the woman doing the tours was wearing this cute little power suit, and her major was corporate communications.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I switched. So I switched to corporate communications and then did nothing. Yeah, even maybe for nothing in corporate communications, but I ended up in consulting for Accenture out of undergrad, and then went quickly into startups.
So the law thing for me is because you're a great communicator. That's why I kind of put it there. So it's close.
I like
That's
this
close.
guy,
He's great.
Kurt.
I told you.
Yeah.
So the way this all came together, Tashi, by the way, Giovanni's like, "Hey, do you know Tashi from JLL?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know Tashi." He's like, "Okay, great. I can't do a podcast. You're doing it." I'm like, "Okay, cool."
Kurt's my favorite co-host.
Very nice
Yeah.
surprise, kid. This is a great surprise to see.
Awesome surprise, likewise. And the coolest feature of this entire podcast is that this is the first one that we've had the sun rising during it in the background.
Totally.
It's dynamic background.
And
Yeah,
the first
very
time,
cool.
the first
I'll
time
even
you
show you
just
that.
disappeared. Did you lose your power? Where'd you go?
Yeah, I lost
Yeah,
power.
okay.
Laptop died. Sorry.
So there's the sun rising. I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that.
beautiful. Look
There it
at
is.
that. You live on is that
Pretty
do you
much.
live- Yeah, that's nice. That's
It's like
my
almost the
backyard.
closest thing you can get to farmland.
Total. That's why I was like, that looks
In
like my
Sydney.
kind of place.
Well, because my
So
wife
much
grew up
green.
on the farm in
Yeah.
I forget where it is, but let's edit that out because she'll kill me. But yeah,
Yeah.
so we kind of moved here so we could be close to the city for work, but also have 'cause
Yeah.
we've got
perfect.
two farm dogs as well, so we need a decent amount of land for them to
Oh,
run
they
around.
run outside. They
Yeah.
oh.
They love
Okay.
it. Kelpie and a cattle cross.
Ooh.
And Tashi, you mentioned your wife was in startups and the whole kind of tech culture, I suppose. Where did she land?
So she started a couple of businesses, but there was a food company called Thrive, which did breakfast bowls and stuff like that. Then eventually got acquired by Sumo Salad. Then she did a startup called YouFoodie because she's got a couple of conditions where dietary requirements were a big problem for her. So it's like order ahead from restaurants that she'd build, so they could also manage their food waste. Now she's a human resources expert and partner. So part of a business called ECw&x, where a lot of companies, even if they have their HR divisions, they need to outsource a lot of their strategies. So less this person touched me in an inappropriate manner or said something mean. But funnily enough, which is why we have lots of discussions around it, how do we engage our employees? How do we surprise and delight them? How do we get them back into the office? That kind of stuff. So she's doing that. But right now she's being a great mom, because she's got her time off and then I'll be taking my time off in a couple of weeks. Because shout out to JLL for their really good parental leave program.
I love that. Yes. Is that common in
taking
Australia,
time off.
or is that a JLL thing?
It's pretty common. I think JLL's got a pretty good one. I wouldn't say many people take advantage of it because, as you can imagine, brokers, if they've got a high commission structure and low base, they wouldn't want to disappear too long. That being said, I think they recently changed it, and I could be getting this wrong, but so good in Australia where they look at the commission you made last year, even if you're a leasing agent, and they give it to you for the year that you take your leave. So I've actually got 4 months off paid leave. Not that I necessarily take
incredible.
that gap.
Yeah.
Yeah, take that gap. I'll prorata it because I'll work 2 days a week or something. But super important because, like, the second I saw my son being born, I was like, whoa, the whole world is just priorities have shifted, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's no longer fun and games. It's no longer a leaderboard. It's all about making sure this one's secure and safe. And I get to see all the important things in growing up. So, yeah.
Jamie, do you want to end on your famous last question?
Oh, it's time. That went fast. We might have to do this again.
Tashi's great. He's a great guest. I mean, this is a really happy accident. He's got a ton more to share because
Yeah,
we didn't even scratch the surface.
that's what I feel like. We haven't even, gotten into it.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to. I'd love to.
we'll do it again, and we'll do it later. Oh, the problem is you and Kurt are like on opposite ends of the day.
We can do it this time. I like it. And I'll make an effort to find a really cool. I'll set up almost like a camera so that maybe I do it when my back is facing the sun. So
Ooh.
during the thing, you get
It'll-
like this.
And we can watch all the deer and rabbits all eat behind you. Disney movie
There'll be like
with the sunrise.
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, we'll plan that one. Okay, so Tashi, you're out with your JLL friends,
Yeah.
and you're doing some team bonding, and you hit a karaoke bar. What's your karaoke song?
Aerosmith, I don't want to miss a thing.
Wow.
Nice.
Man, I used to annoyingly start with that song because I lived and worked in Singapore for like 5 years. With,
Okay.
Asian
Karaoke
culture
is
karaoke.
That's
Deals were
capital.
done in
Yeah.
karaoke rooms at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'd love that song because it just let me scream at the top of my lungs. There's a few verses where it's like, yeah, 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 yeah. I can't sing anymore. Can't sing for shit. But back then I used to do that a lot. So I would, if we went to karaoke right now, I'd give it a shot, but then I'd be sorely disappointed at how I could not hit those high notes anymore, probably.
Well, I think, you never could, but the alcohol convinced you might have.
Yeah. Probably true. Very true.
That's what I was thinking, Kurt. But yeah, totally. I am not a late night partier, but I'm pretty sure that if I lived in Singapore with karaoke bars, I would totally turn into late night. Yeah,
Yeah.
super fun. Okay, well, thank you. We'll wrap until next time.
Thanks, guys. That was a great way to start my day.
Thanks, Kurt, for co-hosting.
Oh, thank you so much. It's truly great to see you, Tashi. It's been too long, and I genuinely appreciate all the stuff you put out on LinkedIn, like such high quality stuff. Jamie, I don't know if you saw that he put out one where I think maybe it was just you talking to the camera with like talking about like activation of a space and like what you're actually doing. I'm like, finally, this is what we need. We need more of this. And
I'm gonna go watch. Well, I'm now following Tashi on all the channels, so I'm gonna go binge watch Tashi on LinkedIn and YouTube.
I'm only good in small doses, a few minutes a day at tops.
And we'll link to your channels in the show notes, as Kurt said. So in the Quantum
Awesome.
project and anything else, feel
Awesome.
free to send along. Okay, until next time, guys.
You're the man,
Bye,
Tashi.
everyone.
Bye.
See you later.